Okay, I'm reviewing the DaYan TengYun V2. For some reason, there are a lot more excited people for this cube than for other cubes. The DaYan TengYun V2 is $32 on Speakeasy Shop unless you use the discount code JPerm. It has a customization system for the springs, screws, and magnets, and it's one of the cheaper ones to have this. Before going into that, let's talk about the main qualities of this cube and compare it to the TengYun version 1. The TengYun V2 is really fast, smooth, and flexible. One of my favorite things about the TengYun version 1 is how quiet it is. On top of that, it's also pretty low pitched, but that's my TengYun version 1 out of the box. Here's the one I've been using as my blindfolded main. I feel like cubes get louder as they get older, and I'm pretty sure they also get louder if you make them looser. The volume is kind of similar, but it also depends on the settings, so I'm just gonna say that the TengYun version 1 is definitely quieter than the version 2, because on the version 2, I think that settings that are really tight are not as good, so you probably won't use it that much. But no matter what, it's still gonna be better than a lot of other cubes just because the pitch is low. Except for the GAN access, that one's pretty quiet too. So I keep talking about the settings, let's look at what they are. First off, we have the magnet strength, which is determined on the edge pieces. In the box, you'll get a flathead screwdriver, which you can put into here. So right now the magnet's on 2, so the second strongest magnet. What you can do is turn it like this, and then you can have it now on 3, which is the third strongest magnet, or the weakest one. Then there's also 1, which is the strongest magnet, and this is a lot easier to see in real life than in the video. So in a lot of flagships nowadays, we don't only see a way to change the magnets, but also the centerpiece travel and spring strength. These all affect the cube in different ways, and each cube has its own system, so let's look at how the TengYun V2 deals with these. The screw head sits on top of the first blue device, and here you can see, or maybe you can't see, so this controls centerpiece travel distance, and if you set it on 0.6, the screw is quite high up, but if you set it on something like 1.2, where you give the center more distance to travel, then it dips in. The second blue device has another spring inside that is not the one that you change, it's just there. And so you attach all this together, and you can see that here on the teeth on the left side, they go at different depths. The part on the right can sit on the different depths of teeth on the left, and so you end up with different heights for this. Right now it's pointing at 0, which means it can compress all the way, but if you move it to the highest setting, which is 1.5, then it can't compress very far. So this is what it looks like setting the spring compression to 0, which means the spring is not compressed at all. You can see it pretty much just goes to where the grooves of the screw begin. This means it has a lot of room at the top for the screw to move around, and if it's less compressed, then it doesn't exert as much force to hold the cube together. Now I have it on 1.5, which is the tightest spring compression. It makes the spring stronger and therefore the cube more stable. And how that works is it moves the spring slightly past the grooves. So what the center cap would do is push it back here. And when the spring is more compressed, it's exerting more force to get back to usual. So it's applying more force to keep your cube stable. Since the centerpiece travel setting in the inner ring here doesn't affect things too much, then you'll still want to make sure the screws are in at a reasonable depth and even on every side. How you can make sure each side is even, so I will test yellow and white right now. I just have them on either side and pull apart at the edges while compressing the edges from the other side. So pulling apart at the top here and compressing on the other side. So they're pulling apart at the same amount on both sides, so it's pretty even. And make sure you don't focus on the corners because they can just go all random. You also don't want it to be too tight or too loose, so this will obviously depend on your preference, but this is a reasonable amount. So I'll use the small end of the blue tool to change the inner part, and right now the screw is pointing at 1.2, so I'll just get them all to 1.0. So I put this right here and then make sure I push down first, otherwise if I just turn, I'll actually turn the screw, which I don't want to do. So I'll push down, turn the 1.0 over a little bit, then kind of let go so that it's allowed to pop back up, and now just turn very lightly until it snaps, and now it's on 1.0. Now for the outer settings for the springs, I actually don't know what each of them really feel like, so I'm just gonna put them all in the same one and see what that does. Right now this is pointing at 0, or the right side also pointing at 0, and I'm gonna make sure I get it to 0.5. So just like before, I'm gonna use the outer one this time, and then push down, get it in the direction I want, let go a little bit so that it's popping back up, and then just keep moving very gently until it snaps into place. Now it's on 0.5. And here are the possible settings again, so remember the inner ring is for centerpiece travel. You can also think of the inner ring as looseness, so a bigger number means more loose. The outer ring is for spring compression, and you can think of this one as stability. The higher the number, the more stable the cube will be. So right now, if I put the blue thing on and just press down, watch as I try to turn. So I'm pressing as hard as I can, I turn and the screw turns with it. This happens because as you push down, you have to push it down far enough to dodge the whole top of the screw, but that doesn't always happen, especially if the screw is too tight. So here I actually have to loosen the screw a little bit. Oops. And now if I push down with this tool, there's more room for it to travel down. So as it goes down, it will not turn the screw with it. Now, if you have the screw in a place where it's almost loose enough, then you might get the plastic damage like I have here. So that's a little bit annoying because even with the factory screw settings, you may have to loosen it a bit to not run into this problem. After trying a lot of the settings and the extra springs that come in the box, I have to say that I don't like the extra springs. I think that those springs are too strong, and so they make the cube really stable but then less flexible and has a harder time corner cutting and a little bit slower. Those things are all okay and even usually things that I like, but this goes a little bit too far. The settings I ended up going with were, for the screws, just keep it the same as it was out of the box. I put the inner setting on 1.0 and the outer setting on 1.5. For magnet strength, I had them on 2. Now it's important that I also specified just how deep the screws were in, not just the inner setting being on 1.0. So if I tell you that the inner setting is on 1.0, that's a little bit meaningless if you ever change the screws. That's because the inner blue setting does a similar amount to just turning the screw a couple of quarter turns. So if you want to follow someone else's settings exactly, you have to make sure both of those are correct. In other words, I feel like turning the inner setting is useless because you could just turn the screw instead, which is easier, and I believe it does, if not the same thing, a very similar thing. And this is why for something like the GTS 3, you can change the springs, you can change the screws, but there's no extra thing in the core, because there's really only 2 things you can change in the core. Now, customization aside, do I like the way the cube turns? I think that this cube is great in a lot of ways, except for just it has a few qualities of the Valk power that I didn't like. The corner cutting is really snappy, and what I mean by that is it doesn't have really smooth corner cuts, and it will make big motions that are really fast at once to complete the corner cut. And I much prefer having a smooth motion that's easier to control, so I had a lot of trouble in some algorithms on this cube, like I particularly mess up on certain reverse corner cuts during D moves. So far, the MGC V2 and the Valk power are the main ones that have this problem. The TengYun V2 only does this a little bit, and my solves are completely fine when it doesn't happen, but it still messes with my confidence, and I choose not to turn at my fastest because it's just going to happen more. And remember, just because it has some things I don't like about it doesn't mean I don't like the cube as a whole. It's definitely still one of my favorites, although I definitely prefer the GAN XS and Valk Elite a lot more than this. Now, some of you have asked why the TengYun version 1 is my blindfolded main and why maybe I don't switch to the version 2. Well, first of all, just because it says version 2, it doesn't mean it's that similar or even an upgrade. In this case, for regular 3x3 solving, I do believe the TengYun version 2 is better, but the reason blindfolded is different is because if you use 3 style, then you have to use a lot of slice moves. So for blindfolded, I look for a different set of qualities, and that would just be cubes that are fast and have very easy and better than average corner cutting, and the magnet strength cannot be too strong. I would say the TengYun is good at all of those, and the TengYun version 2, just looking at those things, it is worse. I would say the TengYun version 2 is mainly just better in stability. So thank you to SpeedCubeShop for sending me the TengYun V2 to review. If you want to check out any of these products, then go to the description and make sure you use the discount code JBERM. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.